Have you ever had something in your life that you feel incredibly close to, yet you barely interact with it? Like your favorite stuffed animal when you were younger, or that one friend from school that you haven't seen since the fourth grade, but if you met again nowadays, you know you two would immediately get back into the same chaos? Or maybe even a TV show or movie that you hold near and dear to your heart, but you just can't bring yourself to watch it again. I don't know if this feeling makes sense, or if any of you feel the same way about certain things, but however you describe that feeling, that's how I look at the game, This War of Mine. For those of you that don't know or haven't heard of it, This War of Mine is a 2D side-scrolling survival game set in a post-apocalyptic world in a reality where war has overtaken everything, and the only thing left in the world is protecting your own. A survival of the fittest game, if you will, but to the most emotionally gruesome extent, assisted by the beautiful gray aesthetic and sketch-like art style that really hones in on the gruesomeness. You play as a multitude of characters, all with differing personalities, strengths, and weaknesses. It's up to you as their guide to bring them to the right path and survive to the end no matter the cost. There are some characters like Esma or Erica that are better at scavenging and are quick on their feet, however their strength may not be as high. Others, like Katya and Zlatya, are great talkers and incredibly empathetic, but can't handle trauma as well as some others due to their own existing ethics. And then there are some like Roman or Bruno that are tough and don't get easily swayed by certain events, but they never really get along with others. It's these different characteristics that make every playthrough of this game a whole new experience. The game works on its own day-night cycle, where the day portion is focused on working on reforming and building up the house, and the night portion is purely focused on scavenging for supplies. With the day phase, you will go around the house doing objectives such as rummaging through piles of junk, digging up rubble from the bombing aftermath, breaking down furniture, unlocking certain doors and cabinets, and crafting stations like workshops, stoves, and heaters to help better your chances at survival. The day phase takes a lot of coordination and planning as it utilizes certain base management mechanics, meaning you have to know what you plan on crafting for that day as well as where you plan on placing it in the home. The reason that this is important is not only because crafting takes time to build, but you also can't change where you place an object after it was put down in the house. This mechanic is what makes the base management system so intriguing, because something as simple as having your workshops right next to each other or having one on each floor could make or break your time management throughout the playthrough. Every second matters. All your time is incredibly valuable. Each day phase is 14 in-game hours, equaling to around 6 minutes in real life, and the night phase is 8 in-game hours, also equaling the same amount of time. Time is everything in this war of mine. From cooking, to crafting, to sleeping, to cleaning, all of it requires time to pass in order to complete. The characters you control within the game also utilize time as well, needing time to pass to eat, to heal from any sickness or possible wound, for getting around the house. This is why crafting placement is so important, because if you have crafting stations on either side of the house, the character you send to craft will have to run to the crafting station, build the object, then run to the placement of said object, and build it there. That time in between could mean life or death for your characters. On the bright side, when you're in a workshop crafting menu, time stops, and you can take all the time you need to figure out what you plan on crafting, so that's nice at least. The night portion of the game, as mentioned before, is focused purely on scavenging for supplies. Now there is a bit of slight preparations that you'll need to take before heading out. Firstly, the different locations you can scavenge from. The selection of locations is randomly generated with each playthrough, with each having varying levels of possible hostility. Some areas like the abandoned cottage are labeled safe, where you have no possibility of getting injured or killed, where others like the sniper junction are labeled danger, having very valuable loot, but it is also incredibly risky to enter. The second preparation you need is your scavenger of choice. You'll tend to lean more on the characters that have the most bag space, like Boris or Marco. However, as mentioned before, certain characters can have their own drawbacks. Boris, for example, can carry the most in his inventory out of any other character, but he's one of the slowest characters in the game and makes a lot of noise when going up and down stairs. So depending on the location you choose, you'll want to bring the right person for the job, whether that's high inventory for gathering and trading, or bringing someone with high combat efficiency for those riskier locations. Another important preparation to think about, alongside the person you choose to scavenge, are the materials or weapons you plan on bringing with you. If you bring a tool like a shovel with you, it'll help dig out rubble a lot faster, but it takes up an inventory slot, meaning that that's less supplies for you to take back home. This is why every piece of management is important within this game. Base management, time management, and inventory management are all extremely important to figure out during your playthroughs. Also, I forgot to mention within both cycles, there is the opportunity to trade the items you have with other people in-game. In the day phase, on random occasions, a trader will come to the door and you can trade anything that's within your inventory at that moment. In the night phase, depending on the location you choose for scavenging, you may be able to trade with what is currently on your scavenger's person. That's why you have to make sure about what you plan on taking with you before each scavenging session. Luckily, just like crafting, throughout the trades the timer stops, so you don't have to rush yourself in figuring out what to trade within a moment's notice. Now, it's been lightly mentioned throughout this video, but what I truly love about this game, above everything else, is that the game is randomly generated, meaning every event that occurs, every character that you meet, the supplies that you find, all of that is different every single playthrough. Even the characters you start out with when you click new game are all different. With the multitude of characters, as mentioned before, the actions you're able to do may be limited, and you might have to switch up from your normal routine. All of these factors add to the complex strategy that goes into the gameplay, as well as the story. Your choices and the characters you're given will determine the direction of the story and how you as the guide will go about it. For instance, say you take Anton out to go scavenging and you send him to the quiet house. This house has an elderly couple inhabiting it, and they're just living their best life throughout this trying time. Anton enters the house and the elderly man is shocked and asks you to leave them be, as his wife is really sick and needs their supplies. The old man will also follow Anton throughout the house so that he can keep an eye on him from stealing their stuff. Now, you could very easily listen to this kind old couple and leave them in peace. Or you could grab the handy dandy knife and shotgun and blast your way through that gorgeous loot, baby! In all seriousness, doing so could cause not only your scavenger's morale to go down, but also the morale of your entire survivors group, which will either put them in a heavy depression or practically break them emotionally, causing them to leave the shelter or worse. Moods of your survivors are incredibly important to stay on top of as well, from general health like hunger and tiredness, to sickness, to both happiness and sadness. All of these factors can affect a character's ability and effectiveness. This game, as mentioned before, is emotionally brutal. Truly, the game should have been called This Depression of Mine, with the different emotions that are expressed throughout the war-torn apocalypse. Not only does it have a grim atmosphere, helped by the sketch-like aesthetic as mentioned previously, but the expressions of your survivors also add to the hardships that they go through. After every big ethical decision, each character will write a journal entry to give their thoughts on the situation, whether positive for your good deeds or negative for the bad. The characters will let you know how they feel, giving them a bit of personality amongst the other playable characters. It helps to humanize them, making you want to help them to survive, rather than just seeing them as guinea pigs to be tested upon. I know I keep bringing it up throughout this video, but the amount of ethical mind games that it will put you through is something I've only ever really seen in more scripted games like The Last of Us or Telltale's The Walking Dead. However, in those games, you control a specific character that has their own interests and goals, and they are the ones that pioneer the story. With The Last of Us, you play as Joel, a gruff, brick-loving badass with a major daddy complex. In the game, start to finish, you play the actions that he wants or needs to do. You as the player don't have any choice in what Joel does. He is his own character. And in The Walking Dead, Lee is someone who has his own set of goals as well, just like Joel does, but this character is a little more open, as Telltale games highly encourage player choices. Now, the one thing about Lee is that he's still a character. While you as the player may be able to choose what he might do, he is still the one to do them. You're acting more as his conscience in a way, telling him what he should or shouldn't do. He never questions the decisions that you make because he is the one that makes them. And you as the player just give him a push in that direction. In this war of mine, you are the one that decides everything through gameplay, not through a script. The people you control may have their own specific characteristics, but you are the driving force of keeping them alive and running their story. Deciding who eats what food, who goes out and scavenges, who stands guard, where they sleep, who they talk with, how they go about it all. The decisions you make could heavily affect the mental states of your survivors, as mentioned previously with the blicky blicky shotgun knife combo on Grandma Margaret. All of that decision making comes down to you and you alone. And they will all have different reactions and questions as to why the choice was made. The game puts you at the forefront of the ethical decisions, from those you help or abandon to those you leave in peace or those you fight. It measures on your own sense of empathy and care for others. Now, all of this may sound like a lot to keep track of with all the different management mechanics, and while it does take a bit of thinking and planning, it's not as complicated as this video may make it seem. Yes, there's a lot to manage, but all of it blends so nicely because all that management feels more natural rather than overbearing. Something as simple as, oh, one of my survivors is hungry? Well, that turns into, okay, do we have food? Let's cook some of it, eat it, plan for scavenging tomorrow to feed them again. Where do we scavenge and what can we trade? It seems like a lot, but it's truly just natural thinking. You would think the same exact way if you were in the same scenario as these survivors. Now, with all that being said, I only described the basic premise of this game. What I have gone over in this video has mainly been focused on the main game mode presented from the very beginning. I haven't even touched the DLCs and additions that they've added into the game to not only spruce up even more playthroughs, but also bring about new stories, life, and perspectives into this grim world. There's even a mode where you can create your own custom story with any of the characters of your choice. The main DLC that was added that is probably the most recognizable, at least to me, is The Little Ones. This DLC added a couple of playable characters alongside the addition of children being added as playable. They don't really do too much in the form of assisting the shelter, as they can't really go scavenging for supplies at night, but adding this element to the game is a whole new difficulty curve, as well as giving players a perspective on what life would be like living in a war-torn town with a child. It's a perspective that I don't think anyone in their lives would ever want to go through in the real world. Imagining having to take care of your own children during tough times as the ones presented in this game. This stuff is, and can happen at any point in our lives, and we should be grateful that this is something a good amount of us will only ever experience on the digital screen. This game continually makes me look at my own life and see how lucky I am to live the life I was given. Others are not so lucky. And if any of you watching have had to go through something similar, I'm so genuinely sorry that life hasn't been as kind. And I truly hope you're able to live the life you deserve to live. I know I'm just a guy behind a screen talking to himself, but it's games and media like this that help spread the word that not everything is perfect. It helps give everyone a perspective on themselves and be able to better appreciate the little things like sleeping in a mattress, having a cell phone, being able to say hi to your mom. These little things in life are what make living so special, and we should never take any of that for granted. Live your best life, because you deserve it. Well, that took a bit deeper of a turn than I was expecting to. Sorry about that. Let's jump back into the main topic, shall we? Another set of DLCs they brought to the table was a series called Stories. Now, I'm gonna be real with y'all. True to the title of this video, I have yet to play any of the Stories DLCs. I myself have only played through the base format of the game, and I apologize for that. Apparently the Stories mode is more along a script of specific characters that will always stay the same every time you start them up. But they all have their own specific objectives, locations, and stories within each story DLC. They also add new characters to the roster, as well as completely new locations than what we see in the base game. And I would play the DLCs now during the making of this video, but not only has this video been pushed back enough, I feel it's kind of fitting that I have yet to play any of them before this video, as the title suggests. I'm sure they're absolutely fantastic, and depending on how this video is received, I may do a follow-up purely on the stories, doing somewhat of a recap of them, as well as telling and showing you my own experience with the playthroughs. Let me know if that's something you want to see. It's hard for me to express the specific meaning behind the title, My Favorite Game I Never Play. I feel I'm doing a disservice to the developers by never bringing myself to play it on a regular basis. To my close friends, they would know that this war of mine is one of my top 3 desert island games, alongside XCOM 2 and Stardew Valley. It was one of the first digital games I purchased when I grabbed a PS4. It was also the first game I digitally purchased when I got a Switch, and when I got my PS5, it was one of the earliest I had grabbed once I saw they had remastered it. Supporting this development company in every way that I can is a main goal for me, and I'm happy to do my part and show my appreciation. And on top of all of that, when I found out that there was a board game, it was probably one of the quickest purchases I had ever made in my entire life. I won't go into full details on how the board game works, but just look at this! All the base characters molded as board game pieces, and an entire roleplay book of scripts that makes each and every playthrough fresh and engaging, just like the game itself, and you can play it with yourself and others? Sign me up. It does take a practice run or two, like most new board games, to get the hang of it, but it's honestly incredibly simple to learn, needing only one piece of paper to set everything up. If you've never heard of this board game, pick it up. Even if the base game of this war of mine doesn't seem appealing to you, this is challenging and it puts your brain to work. Back to the main game itself, I know I could play it endlessly, and never get tired of experiencing what it brings me every time I play. Whether it's the base game, my own custom story, or the DLC stories, I will always have this game and franchise near and dear to my heart. Art can be expressed in many ways, and uses different mediums to express varying emotions. To me, this war of mine is an art piece disguised as a game. It has an incredibly real foundation, and it focuses a lot more on your own humanity than a written story, or your game's own character motivations. You are the head runner of the story. It may just be a somewhat simplistic base management game on the surface, but at the core of itself is a piece of media that will forever hold a special place in my heart for its deep themes, gloomy atmosphere, and overall message. War is hell, but this one is mine to cherish. 11-Bit Studios, I promise to play this masterpiece more often. And I will get to the story's DLC. Please don't hurt me.